group's topic is environmental injustice of the West Coast, looking at inequities within low-income and minority communities. Low-income minorities experience the most harm from climate change with the burden of financially supporting themselves. They also have to deal with the environmental impacts within the West Coast. Low-income and minorities are impacted by social, environmental, and economic issues. Direct causes of environmental injustice are on health risks of people and social injustice. Indirect causes are on financial instability, such as affordable housing and food. For economic impacts, people's social economic standing greatly affects their vulnerability to environmental justice. Majority of Washington's low-income populations are minorities, as shown by Figure 1. We can take a look at the issue of nutrition insecurity as a demonstration of how socioeconomic standing is a factor of environmental justice. Climate change causes natural disasters to happen more frequently, which affects mass agriculture and the market of nutritious food. Nutritious food is more expensive than unhealthy food, and low-income households cannot afford healthy food. Therefore, they settle for cheaper and less healthy alternatives such as fast food, and that causes low-income households to be more vulnerable to health problems like obesity or malnutrition, as seen in Figure 2. The fast food industry is able to thrive because of low-income workers, but the low-income community does not benefit at all from the industry. The harms of environmental issues fall more heavily on vulnerable and financially insecure households.
With environmental impacts, the first one is air pollution from greenhouse gas emissions. Temperatures are increasing and heat waves are also increasing as well, which means higher risk of non-traumatic deaths such as heat strokes. There's also less tree cover in these communities in Seattle to combat against toxic air and also means less oxygen circulation. The second is water contamination. Sea levels are rising above oil refineries, which are near low-income and minority communities. That means higher risk of flooding, with bacteria, viruses, and parasites infecting the water, and water contamination from runoff, which also is a risk on the safe water for people. Lastly, a toxic environment. The communities closer to refinery infrastructure means they have a toxic environment, such as this picture right here. A young girl is riding a tricycle around a neighborhood with industrial factories in the background. She's an innocent young girl with no knowledge of what is truly happening, but her environment is toxic and is affecting her health.
There are many social impacts involved with environmental injustices. It is very clear that people of color are disproportionately affected and burdened by being forced to live in neighborhoods that are exposed to air pollution, hazardous waste, and deadly toxins. This is due to the factor of over racism and a strong lack of citizen power. Environmental racism can result in children being affected by lead poisoning, families being displaced, and contaminated waters. There is evidence that institutionalized racism clearly dictates and deliberately targets neighborhoods and communities with the majority of people of low socioeconomic status and people of color. People of color are excluded from the plans of distributing environmental rights, policies, and laws, and decisions are made, and they are left vulnerable to environmental diseases and viruses. With the unresponsiveness of government officials and uncooperative fellow citizens, people of color are not given the right to the quality of life.
Solutions to environmental injustice include grassroots activism as a means of individual protest. Not only does this help individuals make a difference personally, but this form of protest can intervene with regulation government protocols that companies are complying with, but that don't include environmental legislation. This can be done, for example, by forcing a pollutant tax on factories through lobbying, creating an incentive to be greener for cheaper. Another solution is advocacy planning, which entails allowing community organizations such as a neighborhood council to meet with local urban planning representatives and talk through their environmental concerns. This can prevent situations such as factory groupings in small areas that can create disproportionate pockets of polluted air. My final solution was mass publicization. This includes using direct action methods to create change, chiefly by using personal power, economic or otherwise, to reach environmental goals, as opposed to encouraging an outside party to write or influence legislation. Effects already in action in the Pacific Northwest to make change include Governor Jay Inslee's newly released plan to require environmental justice assessments of all climate-related investments and include people of color and individual communities in these decisions.